I'm sure many people can relate. You have the comfy salary, you may have a great commission structure, you may have a company car, you may have a company phone, you may have all these things that you've accumulated, let's say, and then to pull all that out and walk away from that and kind of go from ground zero is super scary. This type of business that I chose, it's very difficult to do part-time. You have to be in it if you're going to make it work. When you first start, most of us, you're a solopreneur, right? You're the owner operator. You're actually doing the work. So if you have no idea what that work entails, even bigger concept of how everything affects things, like it's just going to be harder. Obviously, there's not like a right or wrong way. It's what works for you and how you look at things in life and what works for the business. Going back to your personal preference, like I'm allergic to debt. I'm a Dave Ramsey fan. I'm debt free. Like I just don't, I leverage when it comes to real estate, but not anything else, when it comes to like credit cards or borrowing or whatever. If that debt is not making me money, I'm not doing it. I was so worried all the time and kind of stressed all the time. And I always just thought, well, it's me. Like, Alexis, you're just a crazy person. Like, you're just anxious, you're this, you're that. But getting on those calls, I'm like, wait a minute. It's not me. Like, everybody else goes through the same thing.
What is it really like to be a franchise owner? In this episode, I sit down with one of our clients, Alexis, who purchased a property management franchise almost 2 years ago. Now, I always tell people that the goal is not to own a franchise, it's to own a profitable business. And really, it's about what that business creates for you and your family and contributing to your lifestyle. So it's something Alexis had some wisdom on to share about how she manages her profitability in her business after launching it just 14 months ago, as well as how she manages her quality of life with her business. I also asked her about marketing and what she's learned about marketing to grow her business, as well as what's worked for her and what hasn't worked. We talked about specific marketing strategies there. We also talk about hiring and building teams and how to balance that with the need for cash flow. And everyone always wants to know, what does a day in the life look like as a franchise owner? So Alexis gave us a breakdown of what a day in the life of a franchisee in her business looks like. Now, if you want to buy a franchise in the next 12 months, you should check out my free franchise masterclass at franchiseempire.com/masterclass. And if you want to work with me and my team on finding or buying a franchise or resale business, then you can go to franchiseempire.com/check territory, and you can schedule a free call to see what's available in your area. The link is also in the description below. With that said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Franchise Empire Show. They say Rome wasn't built in a day, and building your empire doesn't happen overnight. My name is Tarek Johnson, and owning franchises is what helped me go from employee to employer and start building my empire for my family. So this podcast is for you, the empire builders. For those of you who want to build something that stands the test of time. This is for those of you who are crazy enough to believe that you can make the dream in your head come to life. This podcast is all about bringing you real people who are building real empires so you can get inside their mind and heart and get proven strategies and actionable insights that will catapult you to build, grow, and scale your empire. All right, Alexis, welcome to the Franchise Empire Show. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So this is, we're coming full circle here.
For sure. It's been a ride the last, 2 years almost?
Yeah. Well, you were telling me last time we connected that, which I didn't know. I mean, I don't know, we've been working together for over a year now, right? It's been over a year. I had no idea that you didn't find me or us on YouTube and you found it through a podcast platform, which is funny.
Yeah, it is. I'm kind of anti social media, and I know that sounds crazy as a business owner, but I don't Instagram, I don't TikTok, I don't do any of that stuff, and so I don't YouTube either. So I had no idea you were even on YouTube. I am just an avid reader. So my Audible is always on, and then also podcasts, Apple Podcasts. So I'm always looking for business self improvement type of things. And that's when I was shopping for a franchise, I started trying to look for podcasts about franchising, and I found yours. And that's how it all happened. And I think you only had a few episodes in when I found you. It was like way in the beginning of your journey. So I've seen, I should probably interview you because I have seen all that you've accomplished and everything that's changed in your business and your life and the extra kids that you didn't have before. I mean, all the things. So,
Yeah, it's crazy. Yo, that's the cool thing about content, huh? You can really kind of get to know someone. It's like you build a relationship through the listening. Um, I recently I went out. Uh, have you ever? Well, you don't watch YouTube. That's right. You ever heard of a name Ryan Ryan Pineda?
no.
Oh, okay. He's a big YouTuber, big into real estate.
Okay.
Anyways, I got to go out to California a couple of last week and interviewed two people I've been watching on YouTube for years. One guy has like 700,000 subscribers. One is like 400,000. Just big names. They do big things in the business world, and so it was cool and it was really crazy because it's just like I felt like I knew them because I've been watching them for years. You know.
Yeah. Very surreal.
So give us a little bit of background, like what, and we drop an intro after the episode after we record. I record a custom intro, but like, who are you and what do you do? What business are you in?
So I own a franchise with Property Management Inc. in Tampa, Florida, and we manage single family rentals for investors and accidental landlords. I was in corporate America for many years. I actually was in the auto industry and worked with a particular brand for 13 years and moved for them several times, grand open stores, worked every department probably in that corporation, and then just got to the point where I felt like I learned enough of business and management and wanted to run my own business because that was always the end game, but I wanted to learn from someone else. So I trudged through the corporate world for all of my 20s and most of my 30s and then decided it was time. I think COVID definitely, like most of us probably have this story, kind of propelled that and accelerated it because it was something that was long coming and I kept kind of pushing it off. But here I am today owning the company and we're almost 2 years in. I signed my franchise agreement in October. So this October will be 2 years that I signed.
That's crazy. I can't believe it's been
Isn't
two. That is just wild.
it crazy? Yeah. I mean, I didn't officially go to training until like 6 months after I signed, and then I didn't open for business for a few months after. So, official, revenue count, I'm probably 14 months in or so. But yeah, it's been 2 years since I actually signed and paid that chunk of change.
So our team have looked into a few hundred franchises and put together a list of 5 low-cost franchises that all make $1 million or more and that have a proven track record of both happy and profitable franchisees. So if you have a net worth of at least $150,000 and you want to see if the territory that you want is still available for any of these franchises, then you can go to franchiseempire.com/check territory. All right, let's get back to the episode. That's incredible. And before we dive into, really your business and kind of what you've learned and experienced, over that time, like I guess, there's a lot of people that maybe are in a similar spot where they've been in corporate for a while now. What can you remember what specifically you were experiencing like mentally and emotionally at that point in time that was the catalyst for you to go, you know what? I think I'm going to do this because you had been looking into franchising for like 10 years, right?
Yeah. Over those 10 years, I just kept, life kept moving forward. I got married and then I bought a house and then I bought investment properties and then I had kids and I kept getting promoted and I kept moving markets and I kept getting bigger stores. And so I just kept propelling life, and kind of checking off all these goals and boxes. So it made it hard to pull out, and I'm sure many people can relate. You have the comfy salary, you may have a great commission structure, you may have a company car, you may have a company phone, you may have all these things that you've, accumulated, let's say, and then to pull all that out and walk away from that and kind of go from ground zero is super scary. And it takes something like you're saying, a catalyst to really kind of force you in a way to make that decision. I think a lot of people have a hard time making that decision on their own. And of course, you can try to baby step it. You can try to start the business, part time and, kind of smooth your way in once revenue gets there and all that. But in my opinion, like it's the band-aid effect. Like this type of business that I chose, it's very difficult to do part time. You have to be in it if you're going to make it work. And so just jumping on it all in. But I think there was a combination of things. But honestly, I think COVID just really did it for most people that I talk to that have started their businesses in the last couple of years. It was just that burnout. It was that, the layoffs and the furloughs. It was just the uncertainty. It was the, I can't control my income anymore. It's at the hands of these people because of the situation. So it just kind of ramped up all the things that I already knew, but it really brought it full circle during that time. And in the car industry, they did not want to shut down the dealerships, completely during COVID. Everyone was working, but we were working with 30 to 40% of the usual staff. So having to have those conversations and, furloughing people and letting go of people and telling others who were staying that you still have to do the job, but now you have to do, the six people's job that are not here at the moment. It was just a lot. And, they brought on a lot of new processes to keep people safe. So there was just all these new procedures that we had to do. We had to clean, the cars every 30 minutes. We had to do all these things. And it was just a lot. It was a lot. So it just, the amount of burnout I was experienced just got even worse with COVID, and looking around and just seeing how everything was handled. I was like, you know what? I think it's now or never. So that kind of, I would say, was the catalyst.
Now or never. What a powerful phrase. And it's something that I feel like the people that we wind up working with that are the most serious, that actually do something and actually buy franchise, they kind of have that mindset. It's like, I've been thinking about this for a while, whether it's franchising or just owning their own business, but they have that now or never mindset. So I think it's funny that you said that, and it makes a lot of sense. What's interesting to me, Alexis, is that we're kind of obviously we're not in COVID anymore, but some of the fears and things you talked about is like it's happening again now with AI and things shifting in the market. There's a lot more layoffs now, and kind of that same uncertainty is out there. I know we're talking to more and more people that are looking at franchises because they've been laid off more than ever in the past 4 years that we've been doing this, which I think is an interesting trend to see. But why did you choose the property management business?
I chose it because it was something that I felt like I knew a little bit about. I was already an investor myself. I was already a landlord. I was already managing my own properties. So I just felt like I had that knowledge. I've always been super interested in real estate. I just never made it like my main gig. So it was that. It was also the cost of entry. One of the things that I really believed was I didn't want to have huge, debt service and have to take 5, 10 years to get out of it. So I was looking for a franchise specifically that was really low cash at entry. And that's one of the companies I found that you didn't need a ton of money. I looked at restaurants, quick service type things like you did, and just the build out cost and how much capital you had to borrow, the SBA loans, all that. I just felt like you would be paying debt for years before you're really profitable. So this is a business that didn't take, as much, probably a fraction of what some of those other franchise cost. So I really like that. And I basically funded it with a ROBS program. So I didn't want to have to pay interest and pay someone else back. So I think just those three things kind of just made it that this was it.
Yeah, that makes sense. How has well, and actually to that point, I wanted to go back to Rob's for in a second, but how has choosing a business that's in an area that you have a passion for, that you have an interest in, wh- what has that done for you? Like, do you like what do you think it would have been like on the opposite side if you just chose kind of like a random business or franchise that wasn't aligned with something that you already felt pretty strongly about or believed in?
Yeah,
Has it made it different for you?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I think that the mountain would have been just harder to climb and the peak would have looked way further away. You know what I mean? Like you're already learning so much every day and you're having to make all of these decisions, these micro decisions, big decisions constantly. And if the learning curve is so steep because you don't know how to run your own business, maybe you don't know how to read a P&L, maybe the finances, like you don't have that part, or maybe you don't have the sales part. Like you're good at that stuff, but you don't have the sales and marketing. I think those two things you have to be successful. But if you don't and you're learning all that, then couple that with learning the actual trade, the actual job of what you're doing, right? Because when you first start, most of us, you're a solopreneur, right? You're the owner operator, you're actually doing the work. So if you have no idea what that work entails, even bigger concept of how everything affects things, like it's just going to be harder because you're going to have to master that and then go on to mastering all these other things. So I think if you can go into something where you have a little bit of knowledge, even if you worked, for 2 years in college way back, like some sort of grasp as what that job's going to be, what it's going to entail, I think the learning curve will be not as sharp, which obviously is going to be a better enjoyment. You're going to enjoy the ride better.
Yeah. And so you did Rob's, you know, there's one of the most common questions that we get from folks is, how am I going to fund this thing? Or, what's the best funding path for me and my situation specifically? Obviously it's part of it is personal preference, right? To be honest, but what would have been some of the pros and cons of you choosing the Rob's path to fund your business?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with the personal preference. I don't think, obviously, there's not like a right or wrong way. It's what works for you and how you look at things in life and what works for the business. Rob's may not be an option if you're doing a multi location franchise, a master franchise agreement. You may not have enough to fund that, or even if you have a, $600,000, $700,000 build out, you may not have enough. So in the Rob's, depending on your situation, right? So it may not work for everybody. But I also like going back to your personal preference. Like I'm allergic to debt. I'm a Dave Ramsey fan. I'm debt free. Like I just don't. I leverage when it comes to real estate, but not anything else. When it comes to like credit cards or borrowing or whatever. If that debt is not making me money, I'm not doing it. Right. So that's just my belief, my preference. So even though the business will make you money, I just, to me, those long-term SBA loans just didn't fit that little box that I believe in. So for me, it was like, okay, well, I have this money there. It's my money. I've worked really hard to put it there. And I think I can get a better ROI on that versus letting it sit in the S&P 500 or whatever. So that's just my belief and my personal preference. But that's what really guided me on deciding what to do, because the fear of signing that loan for $600,000, like and running the projections with all that more, those debt payments, I was just like, it's going to take longer than I thought to get out of that. So that's how it's kind of changed. So
And that's a great point. So, because I know that you started paying yourself pretty early on in the business, and so yeah, would you have been able to do that if you didn't go the Rob's route? Like, how would that have changed the whole financial ramifications of the business?
yeah, I really believe that would have changed a lot of things, because I think I would have been negative cash flow for a while had I had to make those loan payments, right? And with negative cash flow, I was negative for a while, but it I think I got out of that sooner. And once I started to get closer to that, like, okay, I'm not bleeding as much cash, I was able to start deploying and reinvesting in the business sooner. And it was still scary because I still wasn't profitable. I wasn't at the point that most people would say, yeah, now it's time to grow or expand or do XYZ. But for me, I knew that I was going to need help and I wasn't going to be able to do it on my own. I really think it takes a team. To be a solopreneur, you can only do it for so long, in my opinion, because you will burn out because you're doing so many things. You're the salesperson, you're the executor, you're the finance for, like, you can't work 16 hours a day prolonged. You can do it for 6 months, 8 months, a year, whatever. But at some point you have to crest and you have to see that the end in sight. You know what I mean? So knowing that and knowing myself, I'm a very highly anxious person. And I knew that that pressure cooker situation was only going to last me for so long before I was going to like lose it. So I decided that, right at probably 6 months in, once I started getting business, I hired an assistant. So it was a remote team member, and I didn't have a ton of contracts yet, but I knew they were coming, and I knew if I could hire them now and train them now, once the flood comes, I'll have help. And that costs money, right? But with remote team members, you can really minimize that cost. And I think that if I would have had to pay those bigger debt payments, I don't know that I would have been able to make that financially work, and not run out of cash, basically. So I hired her about 6 months in, and then another 6 months later or so, I was like, I need more help. So then I hired, 3 months, I hired a bookkeeper that does specifically trust accounting. So that took another portion off my plate. And then 3 months after that, I hired a maintenance coordinator that took maintenance off my plate. So I just kind of baby stepped it. They're all remote people, but I definitely don't think I would have ran out of money before, I've been able to do this. So I think not having to have those payments really paid off.
Yeah, and hiring people can be really scary, and I know that we've talked through some of those decisions over the past year or so, as you've were just kind of bouncing ideas back and forth. But what's interesting to me is when people start out in their business, and they or potential franchise buyers go, I want to make as much money as I can in year one. But it's so short sighted, because what you realize is that the most successful entrepreneurs, they're not trying to pull out as much as possible in the first few years. They're trying to pull out enough to support themselves and reinvest everything back into the business, in hiring other people. And you were just, alluding to that. What what has hiring people and taking things off your plate, what has that allowed for in the business? And where would you be mentally if you hadn't?
Yeah, and I want to take a step back from that. So to answer kind of, I guess I didn't answer your previous question 100%, is I did put myself on payroll right around the time that I hired that assistant. For me, it was kind of a realization that I started this business to support my family, have more freedom with my time, who I'm doing business with, where I'm doing business, and when, right? That was the whole premise of me even making this shift. But to starve for a year and not pay yourself, like, to me, it just wasn't serving the mission, right? And I think for me, mentally, it made a huge difference once I started paying myself. Before I was paying myself, everything was, bleak. I guess everything was so hard. And, I just had this mentality of just like, what do they call that? I didn't have an abundance mindset. It was just very like, I'm going to run out of money. I don't have enough. It's not going to get around. I'm not, everything was just a big deal. Once I put myself on payroll, even if it's not, what I was obviously making in my corporate life, but at least getting a paycheck, it just completely changed the way I saw the business, the way I went about things, the way I spent money. Before, it was like I didn't want to spend an extra dollar on marketing. I didn't want to spend an extra dollar here because I didn't have enough. Once I put myself on payroll, it just changed the game, and I started deploying and making decisions that I was probably holding back on, and I felt better about them. So I think, when you're starving and when you're in that little boat where you just feel like you're losing money every day and nothing's moving forward, I really feel like that affects all your decisions, and it affects the direction in which you're going. Once you can kind of level that out and you're not making decisions from a starving mindset, and you're like, okay, my business is serving me at this moment, not 100% where I want to be, but it's a start. It completely changes how you make decisions. And I think that too many entrepreneurs stay in that for too long because they think it's, self-sacrificing. Like, I just have to work hard, give it all into my business, and in 3 years I'll pay myself. Or, but you're losing so much other benefits and momentum and all of these things by waiting that long. So I really feel like people wait too long. And there's, everyone has their own opinions, and there's controversy on that, whether you should or you shouldn't. I think you got to just do what's best for you. And for me, I think it's worked out that I did it at the 6 month mark with some sacrifices. And it really propelled me mentally. And that's what the biggest takeaway was. And then as far as hiring the help, I wasn't working from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. You know what I mean? By hiring those people and taking some of those administrative tasks off, I started to dial back my schedule. I'm not saying I don't work, 8 to 10 hours a day. I still do, but I'm not working 14, 16-hour days. I'm not working the entire weekend. I'm not, it gave some relief, and that really, again, changed my mental framework. It's like, okay, I still got to rest. I still got to go work out. I still got to do all these things that kept me moving forward and keeps me moving forward. So I think, again, people try to muscle it through on their own too long, and then it affects them physically, it affects them mentally, it affects their family, and then it just is like a train going downhill that you can't stop. So I think, you got to find a way to start relieving some of that in the beginning, the first 6 months, sure, the first year, maybe even sure. But at some point you have to have that plan and you have to pull the trigger.
Yeah, very well said. It's such a personal decision on how you kind of do that and manage things. I know in my current business, I'm currently pushing the limits of uh when to hire another person and kind of keep growing. And it's scary. I mean, it is. It's terrifying when you decide to take on another large salary, right? Or bring on another employee. But there's that book, Buy Back Your Time, where it's you're hiring people to do the things that, number one, you don't want to do, that you don't like to do, that you're not good at, and that aren't high leverage or revenue producing activities, right? So it's like by you bringing on those team members that take on those administrative things, allowing you to do what you do best, which is to go out there and generate business. And the more time you have for that, yes, it may take a month or two for you to see the fruits of it, but it's like it's that constant up leveling. And so kudos to you for making those decisions, because I know that they weren't easy, and I know that there was a lot of kind of fear at the time around that. Um, which is kind of an interesting pivot. I'm curious, at one time we had, our franchisee mastermind, going on, and you were always on those calls. Like, one of the things I love about you is that you're so consistent. Like, you show up, and whereas some people might be like, I come on every once a month, or whatever it is, like, you were always there, always ready, always asking questions, always participating, just like, I guess, what I call playing full out. Um, what what impact did that community, and kind of that mastermind and talking, like, some of those more tactical things, what did that do for you at that stage in your business?
Oh, I mean, it was amazing. It normalized all my fears and all my things. Like I tend, again, with my highly anxious nature, I tend to ruminate all the time. Like my mind is always thinking. And one of the great things about anxiety is you really see around corners. You see a truck before it's coming, and you see it before 90% of other people see it, right? Because you're constantly thinking ahead, like, what's going to happen here? What if this happened? It's kind of like what makes a great attorney, because they dive into every little way that case can go, every piece of evidence that could be brought. And it's their anxious nature that keeps them just going down this rabbit hole, right? And so it can be a really bad thing, because once you're in that ruminating stage, it's very hard to get yourself out. But it's also a great thing, because you're thinking so far ahead and you're thinking around that curve before that truck comes around. So I was so worried all the time and kind of stressed all the time. And I always just thought, well, it's me. Like, Alexis, you're just a crazy person. Like, you're just anxious. You're this, you're that. But getting on those calls, I'm like, wait a minute. It's not me. Like, everybody else goes through the same thing. So having that community to normalize your fears, your wins, all the things was so important. In the corporate world, there's a community there. You probably have some leadership training. You have meetings where you're around like-minded people. You're throwing out ideas. You're talking to, whoever. When you're an entrepreneur, especially a solopreneur in the beginning, and especially if you don't have a partner or somebody you're doing this business with, who are you going to talk to? You become very solo, solitude, and you start internalizing that on your head. And you do have family, you have coaches, you have these people that you can talk to, but I find a lot of them, they just don't get it. They want to support you, and they want to feel like, yeah, I understand, but until you've done this journey, it's very hard to really be in that shoe and understand it. So coming on to a call where all these people are going through the exact same struggle was just like, it was such a relief. I tend to be, a very type A, as you and I are like the same person, type A, like checklist, get a gold star person. Um, so knowing that everybody else was struggling and it wasn't just me. And, sometimes there's somebody that was on the call, 3 months ahead of you or a year ahead of you, and you see problems before they happen. I need to look out for that. I would take a note, or just being able to give back. Like there's people on the call that were me 6 months ago, and they were going through the same thing. And I'm like, hey, this is how I handled it. And so paying that forward always to me is like, it feels so good. I love helping others, and I love teaching and training and all the things. And so having the opportunity to have a place to do that was always also really gratifying. So I can't say anything bad about it.
Hey, so if you want to figure out if you should buy a franchise and learn the fastest and easiest way to figuring out the best franchise to buy and everything you need to know about the process, then you'll want to go get access to our Franchise Buyers Academy. In our Franchise Buyers Academy, you'll get a behind-the-scenes look into specific franchises and exactly how much money they are making. You'll get simple formulas for finding money-making franchises and a blueprint on how to scale them into a franchise empire that can be sold for a lot of money later on. You'll be able to finally answer the question on, should I buy a franchise? Now you can get access at franchiseempire.com/FBA. Now let's get back to the episode. Yeah, that's awesome. And how is it different from, because one of the things that's cool about franchising and unique is that you have other franchisees in your system that you can talk to. How how was that different being able to connect with franchisees that weren't in your system? Like was it even helpful? I mean, some people are like, yeah, I have other franchisees I can talk to in my system, so I'm good with that. But I guess what's your perspective on that?
Again, I think it takes it and makes it big picture, and it normalizes everything. So we have exactly what you're saying. There is a call literally every day in my franchise network at 4 o'clock.
Oh
And
wow.
I am on that call pretty much every day, 4 o'clock, whether I'm driving to a property, whether I'm doing an inspection, whatever I'm doing, I have an AirPod in and I'm on that call. Right. And so there is that support there. There is the opportunity to voice a concern or a question and stuff. But what I find is, it's like, when you're in an area when everyone's kind of the same and everyone's doing the same, and it's like it tends to start clouding things, and sometimes it becomes well, the franchisor is not doing enough, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, and it becomes kind of more of that. Where
Mm.
on your call, it's like I was hearing all that stuff. So I'm like, well, then it's not the franchisor. Because if that's the case, then it's every franchisor in America. Because I just heard that on our mastermind call, and that was pizza. That has nothing to do with property management. They're dealing with the same thing. So it started to make me realize that it's not about the franchisor, right? It's like you always say, you have to take control of your business. You have to figure out what works. You have to be scrappy. You have to be and use your ingenuity to come up with ideas. You have to do it. And it's not necessarily just about the franchisor. I know you and I kind of talked about that analogy with the business in the box being like IKEA, right? Like IKEA instructions. And that is what really like changed the game once I got that. Because in the beginning, I just had this misconception that they were going to teach me everything. They were going to teach me everything. And being in the corporate world for so long, I am awesome at following directions. Give me the roadmap, the SOP, like I got you, right? And yeah, they give you an idea, they give you a roadmap, they give you a lot of tools, but man, you're still on this journey kind of on your own, and you got to make it happen. And you can't rely on them, and you can't blame them, and you can't, if you're waiting on them to do it, you're never get anywhere. So that's one of the takeaways by having having that call that had all those different industries, and I would hear the same kind of complaints and everything, it really changed my mindset that it wasn't my franchise that was having the issue. It's just the way business is and entrepreneurship in general. And so it was really cool to hear sometimes ideas that you wouldn't think would work in that industry ends up like, I'm going to take that. There's a little bit there that I could work. I could tweak it in my way, and I'm going to implement that there. And if I was only on those calls, I would never be getting those kind of tidbits.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that the one of the most common questions that people ask is like, well, like what would a day in the life look like? Like I don't have a clear picture of what I would be doing. So, what does a day in your life currently look like in your business?
Okay. Well, it really depends on my family situation, but I usually start my day anywhere from 7:30 in the morning. I'm in my office, or as late as 9, depending on my kids' schedule and stuff. And then I'm probably working till anywhere from 5 to 7, just depending on when that day. So I would say like 7 to 7, somewhere in there is I'm working, right? I usually come into my office first thing and I'm going to check emails. I'm going to check my maintenance board. And then I'm going to look at my schedule to see my calendar to see what appointments I have in the field, what properties I need to visit, and what networking groups I have scheduled for that day. So I just kind of map out, where I need to be and when, and then I start writing down my top 3 things I have to accomplish for that day. Like those 3 things that have to get done no matter what, and I'm going to put those down first. And if I have time before I have to be at a certain place, I'm going to knock those out first. One of the things that I really had to learn is I was like being very reactive to the business in the beginning. So every time an email came in, I was like, oh my God, I have to deal with it now. Like the client needs an answer now. This person needs an answer now. And I would stop what I was doing to address whatever that email that came in. And like, again, part of my anxiety, like I just couldn't stand seeing that mailbox like 10, 12, 13, just like it has to get done. It was driving me nuts. Right. So I've learned to like not do that and put those 3 things down, focus on those 3 things. And if nothing else got done today, but those 3 things, it was a win. Right. So that's kind of how I plan my day, and it's a little bit of everything. It's doing the actual work, it's meeting with clients, trying to get work, it's networking to try to get referrals and build my vendor network. It's doing some administrative tasks, basically overseeing my maintenance coordinator, my trust bookkeeper, and my admin. Checking in, we use Asana, which is a task management system. So I'm always in Asana, signing off on tasks, just checking in their work. And then I do 2 hours of sales calls every day. So from 12 to 1, which is most people's lunch breaks, and then from 5 to 6, which is their commute home, I do what we call dial for dollars. So I am in my lead CRM flow for those 2 hours, and I am calling, following up, doing all the things in my sales funnel. So
Wow,
that's a day in life.
that's awesome. That's super cool. Thanks for sharing that. What what have you learned about marketing since you've started this business?
You definitely helped me with that. You said one time in a call this a while ago, and then you kept saying it. I was like, maybe you said it before and I never heard you, or I wasn't listening. But one time I got it, and then I noticed that you keep saying it, and it was so true. It's like if you have an issue in your business, marketing and sales will solve it, right? If you want to pay yourself, what do you need? You need business, so you need sales and marketing. If you want to hire a person, you need money, so you need sales and marketing. If you want to outsource this vendor or buy this new computer or whatever is in your way, what's going to solve it is money, and money comes from sales and marketing. So I think having that mindset, like you drove that into our heads during that mastermind call, and it's like same thing with my franchise. They're like dial for dollars. If you're not dialing for dollars every day, you're not moving your business forward. And I think there's 2 type of people that get into this: people who are really good at sales and like they love it, and that's not really a problem for them. Their problem is like they don't get, they don't have the business acumen, maybe the finance, they need to work on that. Or there's people that are very process driven, corporate world, checklist, all these things, but they're not great at the sales, or they fear it or whatever. You have to either be that salesperson and make sure you get help with everything else, or you need to hire that salesperson. But to be the process person and think this business is going to grow, it is going to be a hard road. You have to learn to love it, train yourself, or hire someone to do it. But somebody has to be always doing sales and marketing, whether it's networking, whether it's a paid campaign, whether it's a flyer, whatever it is in your world, but you need to be actively trying to get business every single day.
100%. I know that it took me so many years to learn that, and so many failed businesses of trying to perfect things on the back end and realizing like, oh, we don't have any customers. So it doesn't really matter. Um, so what
And the funny part is you get desensitized to it. Like the more you do it, the less you care that they don't answer, that they hang up, that they say no. You're just like, whatever, on to the next. Like, I just know I need to get through this hour. If I do it for this hour, things will happen, right? And in the beginning, you're like, you don't know what to say. You don't sound as polished. You're like all in your head or whatever, meeting that client or making that call or trying to get that close. Like, the more you do it, the less your muscles will hurt. Just do it.
100%. And so what are some of the marketing things that you did? What's been your progression and journey throughout the business of the kind of the tactical side of marketing and kind of what you've, learned there for some folks that maybe are newer, entrepreneurs listening?
One of the things I think, and I told my the CEO of my franchise when we had our final interview or whatever, I said your marketing budget in the FDD is way off. Like they give you a projection, right, of what you should spend, and that's what comes up with the final number to do this business. I'm like, it's way off. The number was not like in a new business, like that needs to be double or triple. Like you need to get behind sales and marketing, do a ton of advertising to figure out what works. And it's going to take some trial and errors because not every market is the same. What works in California may not work here. What works in Lakeland, which is an hour from Tampa, may not work here. Like you have to kind of, I don't want to say throw spaghetti at the wall because we're not just being random, but you have to try different strategies and different tactics and see what works for your area and what works for you. Right? What's your propensity? How do you do your sales and marketing? What are you comfortable with? And so I would say, looking back, one of the things I think I did well is I was like, forget that budget. And I tripled my marketing budget for the first 4 months. And I just got behind it. I did a home show, which if you've ever done a trade show, they're not cheap to get a booth and a table and all the things. And I did that before I had any business. I just spent $2,500. I remember me and my partner were like, we're going to go. And we set up for the day and we just made it happen. And traditionally that's something that people would do after they have the business or whatever. They wouldn't kind of spend the money on the banners and all the, paraphernalia you need to make that booth look good. But it's one of the things that I did, and it was at a real estate show, and it really paid off right at the beginning. So that's just one example. Another example is I tried all different types of lead generators. Like I did Thumbtack, I did Facebook ad, I did Google ads, and then I did, landing pages with a marketing company. So I kind of tried all of these, and I found really quick, well, Thumbtack is garbage. That's not working. One of the other paid lead sources I was using, they send out the same lead to 5 people. And so it became like a fight for all. Like if you didn't call within the first 15 seconds, you weren't getting that lead, right? So I found that wasn't working. So in those first few months, I just spent a lot of money, and then I tracked it and I watched it. And I'm like, okay, how many leads did I get from this? How did I convert? Did I get anything of it? Did it make sense? I tested it for 3 months each, right? Because what a lot of people do wrong is they try it 1 month and they didn't get any business, and they're like, that didn't work. I'm just not going to do it anymore. You need more than a month, right? So I would say by month 4, you should have enough data to tell you whether you should dial it up, dial it back, keep it going, and whatever. And so that was my strategy. I tweaked and adjusted, and probably by the 8th month, I realized that there was one lead service that was working for me, and all the rest were not as high of a conversion. And so I basically pulled all my money out of those, dumped all my money into this one source, tested it again for 3 months. And by the end of that, I was like, this is it. So right now, the only lead source I use is this one paid lead source, and everything else is just networking, referrals, that kind of stuff. So I think you have to really realize that in the beginning, you're going to have to spend money to make money. You have to spend on sales and marketing. And, it's kind of reverse in your brain because you're like, I have no money. I'm not making any money, so why the heck would I spend 3 grand on this, right? But that's the wrong way to think about it. You really have to test, try, figure out what works, and then run for it. Double down once you figure it out.
Yeah, it's so good, so good, and it's it really I love that you talked about data because knowing the numbers helps to, and looking at the numbers, it helps to take the emotions out of it, right? Or if you're feeling anxious or nervous or scary, like I gotta spend more money. How is this going to work? I'm just breaking even, or I'm barely paying myself, but when you know your conversions, when you know your cost per lead, when you know all those things and what it translates to, you can see, okay, well, I'll spend it this month. The next month I'll break even on it, but then in the third month it'll really pay off. And you're just, it takes the emotions out of the equation, which is super important. And I know that just, a couple weeks ago, you and I were kind of having this conversation around potentially, do you hire someone else right now, and kind of like what's the next decision you make? And I think what I said was put the money in marketing, get super busy. You're going to be slammed for a bit, but build up the pipeline really big. And then now you're going into hiring someone knowing that the money's already coming. And it helps to do that. And it's kind of like these sprints sometimes as you're the first couple of years. It's like these almost like 30 or 90-day sprints where you're trying something and you're going really aggressive, and like these series of plateaus, right? And then it's just like, okay, I plateaued again, how do I get to the next level? Plateaued again, how do I get to the next level? And yeah, it's an interesting journey.
No, I was just saying that that conversation is definitely, I took so much away from it, and I'm definitely using that strategy. I'm going to ramp up this next Q4, and then Q1, I'm going to execute the hire. So it was really great insight. And if you're afraid of hiring, then yeah, like you said, just fill up your funnel, and then there you go. The other one thing I wanted to say too is all the decisions I've kind of made, it's helped knowing the numbers, as you said. And one of the numbers that I look at is based off my Profit First system. So I know you and I briefly touched on it, but Profit First is a cash management system by Mike Mikowitz. He has books. He wrote Pumpkin Patch. He wrote a bunch of great stuff. Anyhow, in that program, they teach you what percentage of your revenue needs to be allocated to what. And so one of the things is like knowing what your payroll allocation should be. So if it's 30%, 40%, 50%, depending on your business, you can kind of reverse engineer it. So if I'm making 300,000 in rev, 40% of that is this much money, and how many people can I afford with that? You know what I mean? And it just keeps it really easy, and takes the question of when I should hire out, because you'll know when to hire is when you hit that revenue based on all your numbers. And how do you get to that revenue? Sales and marketing.
That's exactly it. What are the top 2 to 3 things that you've learned about business ownership specifically that's different from being successful in the corporate world?
Oh, that it never stops. Like there's no off button, right? So in the corporate world, for most people anyway, there's a lot of people that still work when they're not at work, right? They're checking emails at 10 o'clock and whatever. But it's just never done. Like you don't get to just like, okay, clock out for the day or leave the office and I'm just done. Like I'm with my family, I'm whatever. It's always constantly going. And I really thought that I could have that, like, oh, I'm off. The business is out of my mind for now. And it's just not how it works. As you know, there's always an idea brewing. There's always something you have to do. There's always an email that comes through, a client call. I mean, it's just, you're always on. That's the biggest thing. I'm like, that's the falseness of owning your own business until you get to the point where maybe you can buy your time back and have enormous team and staff, maybe, but definitely not where I'm at today.
Yeah. And what how do you think you've grown since you started the business?
Well, that kind of leads. So the second thing I would say to your previous question, which answers this one, is you are the barometer of your business. Like your mental state and how you react to things and how your emotional intelligence is being used is a direct correlation of how your business is going to do. You know what I mean? And I think that I realized, and what I've learned is I had to work on me a lot. I didn't realize how bad my anxiety had gotten, for example, or my ruminating had gotten. I didn't realize that being a workaholic and working 14, 16-hour days was not helping my anxiety. I wasn't taking enough time to do self-care and do yoga and working out and all the things I enjoyed once. And I just kind of felt like I didn't have time and my priority was elsewhere. But that stuff directly impacts my business. It's just like, you know, writing a client a check because I made a mistake. It's just that big. Like if I don't take care of myself, right? If I don't go to therapy or do yoga or any mental clearing, however you see that for yourself, if you're not being physical, getting out there, doing a walk, going to the gym, if you're not eating well. I mean, one of the things in property management, like I swear we're like the most unhealthy people. Like we sit at a desk all day, like hours, we don't get up, we don't, you have to be physically well. You have to eat well. You have to work out. You have to do all those things. And I don't think that people put enough emphasis on that. I was talking to a person that's looking to buy a franchise recently because now I'm getting calls, which is so funny because I used to do all of those calls
The
during the
validation
days
calls.
the validation calls where you're like, hey, I just want to ask you some questions. And now I get those calls. So one of the questions they asked was, hey, like, what would you, if you could go back and do differently, what would you do? And I'd say I would take that, 6 months to a year where I was vetting and really like working on what I'm going to buy and how I'm going to do it. And I would start implementing, how am I going to make Alexis the best Alexis she's going to be? And I needed to get a routine down. I needed to work on my mental state then, not in the middle of all of it. So I think if people are like, well, what do I do in preparation? Be the best person you can be, well-rounded. That's, business education. Are you listening to podcasts? Are you listening to YouTube videos or watching YouTube videos rather? Are you learning how to read a P&L? Are you learning, like, it's just getting yourself to be the best you could be. It's like, what did Tom Brady do before he went to the Super Bowl? Like, he did a ton. He did yoga. He ate well. He trained. He watched videos. He did the playback. Like, he did all the things. That's what you should be doing before you open that business.
That's such a really great point because the interesting thing about franchises is that everyone is operating the same business. And okay, yes, there's, some markets are different, but what like the item 19 doesn't say when people are looking at like the financial performance and the average performers and top performers or that oftentimes the difference is just the person. It's the person running the business. It's how well of an entrepreneur they've become. It's how much time and effort and energy they put in, how much time and energy they spend on the high leverage things in their business. And I think sometimes people forget that, especially going into a franchise system, because it's so easy to blame the franchisor. It's so easy to be like, hey, well, you're the reason why my business is not at the level I want it to be, instead of like looking in the mirror and realizing, oh, wow, I'm not showing up as the greatest version of me that I could be. And I mean, I've always been big into personal growth and development. I just made the biggest coaching investment that I've ever made and just hired a coach for, it's going to be 6 figures a year, which is absurd. It's very scary. But I'm excited because I mean, he's built a business where he's done over $50 million in sales. So it's like, okay, if I want to get to that next level, imagine what it's like working with someone of that caliber to show the ropes. And, that kind of investment, I firmly believe will pay off. It always has for me. What are some of the top books, podcasts, things that you like to listen to grow yourself as an entrepreneur?
Well, I tell everybody to read Mike's books. So if you haven't read Profit First, if you're a first time business owner and you don't know the financial part or how to budget or do the P&L, whatever, like, you have to read that book. Get it on Audible, do it while you're working out, whatever. But I think that book really changed my mindset from, the starving entrepreneur that's not paying themselves, that's, double leveraged on their mortgage, that's all these things. It's like, why did you get into business and why did you aspire to that? You didn't, but you made some wrong decisions and wrong turns. Like, so I think the book is just really good. His other book, Pumpkin Patch, I think it's called, is another good one. EOS, of course, like anything in that genre of stuff would be great. I do listen to a podcast called The Anxious Achiever by Maura Allens, I think. I know her name's Maura for sure, but it's called the Anxious Achiever. And it's definitely for like type A, overthinkers, overdoers, get the gold star people. And she brings on these really accoladed, high profile people from these amazing corporations, and they talk about their anxiety. And for me, like, finding a way, like, you're never, if you're an anxious person, it's very rare that your anxiety is going to go away, right? It's there, and sometimes it's worse than others, but learning how to cope and how to deal is the key to it all, and keeping it, under wraps so it doesn't become everything. And that podcast has done really great things for me. So if there's anyone out there like me, type A anxious, I would say start listening to Maura. Her and her guests are awesome. Obviously your podcast, shout out to Empire Franchise. What'd you call it now?
Franchise Empire Show. Yeah, we changed it because
Franchise Empire. You changed it.
yeah, it used to be the Zero to Profitable Franchise podcast, which I think we're actually going to change the name back to that.
Oh, okay.
Bouncing around.
Another thing that I would recommend is there are a ton of podcasts that are industry specific. So I listen to 2 podcasts from like the biggest names in property management every week. So whatever industry they're in, don't forget about that. Find the person who's doing what you do at a huge scale and start just listening and replicating to what they're doing. So that's a big one. And then the last one I would say is called Main Street Business by Mark J. Kohler. He's a tax attorney. And he has amazing content. He's all over YouTube. I don't watch him on there, but he says it every episode. So for those YouTubers out there, you can find him on there. But Main Street Business, and they just talk about everything from how to save on your taxes, how to write off your company car, how to put your child on payroll when they're 15 and have them work for your business. I mean, they just come up with so many amazing strategies on growth, wealth, tax advantages. So I really enjoy that one. Kind of geek out on that.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. I'm going to check out that Anxious Achiever. Fits me perfectly. Cool.
We're not alone, Tarek. We're not alone.
Yeah, yeah, right. Cool. Last but not least, what one piece of advice would you give to someone, who is looking to buy a franchise?
I think a lot of people sleep on the resale. I know for me, I didn't really research resales. Like, I went on Biz Buy Sell a few times and I was like, oh, this is hard. Like, I don't know what this business is doing. It doesn't seem legit. Like, I gave every excuse and I didn't put enough attention into it. But I think that there is something to be said for buying a business that already has revenue, hopefully, positive cash flow, some customers, maybe some processes already in place, maybe some staff. I mean, all of that would help so much in propelling your journey. So if you can focus more on resales, don't just 100% discount them, because it's going to put you a year or 2 years or 3 years down into the business versus starting from complete scratch with no business. That's the hardest part, is learning, again, the sales and marketing. So I would say that would be a big piece of advice. I probably should have spent more time looking into the resale part of things to get started. The other thing I would say is obviously work on yourself. I think that's a big takeaway that we've had during this call, is like, be the best you can be, and get help. Don't try to do it alone. Get into a community, whether it's a mastermind call, whether it's, your industry or your franchise specific, but get help, get a coach. Don't do it by yourself. It's too hard.
Boom. With that said, that's the wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Alexis, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Hey, before we go, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. And the biggest thank you that you could ever give me is to share this episode with someone who you think will benefit. That means that we can share this message with more people and hopefully positively inspire them like we have you. So thank you. And until next time, go build your empire.